Good evening, and welcome to another installment of For the Living of These Days, Equivocation edition. Equivocation. This use of ambiguous language to conceal the truth or to avoid committing oneself. And in that avoidance, we double talk. The connection to avoid committing oneself. Equivocation. Vagueness, ambiguity, uncertainty. We cover our inability to make a commitment by ambiguous language that conceals the truth of who we are, or the truth of what we stand for. So equivocation. To be uncertain, we would say, I say this without equivocation. So what is it that you say without equivocation? And I can only speak of myself in this journey with this word. So the word for the day, my brothers and sisters, is equivocation. To avoid committing oneself, we compromise our core values, and we do not take a stand. Equivocation can sound like this. There's an example I found. Someone once said, the priest told me that I should have faith. I have faith that my son will do well in school next year, so therefore the priest should be happy with me. Equivocation. The term faith used by the priest was in the religious sense of believing in God without sufficient evidence, which is different from having faith in your son, in which years of good past performance leads to faith you might have in your son. So the ambiguity covers our inability to take a stand. I've been meditating on this term today in light of social issues before us. When do I equivocate, doublespeak as to avoid taking a stand for anything? You name it. Racism, homophobia, sexism, ageism, ableism, war, faith, politics. It led me to go back and remembering my reading of Orwell's 1984. A couple of the quotes that just came to my mind. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Double think, right? The power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. He speaks of equivocation. Orwell had a lot of words, news, speak, double think. Wrestling with that equivocation in our lives. When we have a tendency, where is it that you hold two opposing beliefs simultaneously and accept both of them as true? To avoid committing oneself, how shall we live unequivocally? Clarity of our words, conviction of our beliefs, deep faith, total love, courageous and brave, is to wrestle with this in our lives. And I, again, can only speak of myself. I pose a question to all of us. Does there come a time when our equivocation to not decide, our ambiguity on where we stand, trying to straddle the fence, take the middle of the road on an issue so as not to offend or make anyone uncomfortable? When does there come a time when not taking a stand is a form of violence to ourselves or to the world? What do you stand for? What ideal would you give up your life for? Are you willing to live in the discomfort of another's pain, even at the risk of your reputation, or all in the name of love? What does love demand of you? I was attending a workshop with our church, offered by our church, on the community of LGBTQ. And during the discussion, a person attending our conversation who was gay and raised a question, and actually stated to the group, I don't know what you stand for. You know, I don't attend your church or any other church for that matter because I don't know what you stand for. And if I don't know what you stand for, I don't feel safe. That sticks with me as a mantra of conviction and in that, what do we stand for? What do I stand for as a human being who is a follower of Jesus Christ and a priest? It harkens to Matthew chapter 5, beginning at the 37th verse, when he says, "Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one." Why is it so difficult for us to simply say yes or no? Perhaps because we like the ambiguity of not having to follow through with what we say. In other words, we like to equivocate. Or maybe because it's easier to put off a tough decision for a later time, or to not so much take a stand so as to live in these double speak. We may flirt with tendencies toward deceitfulness, not wanting others to know our true intentions. Whatever the reason is, God expects his children to be clear-cut with their words, and rather we are to be people who speak plainly and clearly and truthfully so that we aren't condemned by our own words, by our equivocation. King spoke of this discomfort in a sermon that he gave early on. The sermon was entitled, "But If Not." And these are the words that he said in this sermon. "I say to you this morning that if you have never found something so dear and precious to you that you will die for it, then you aren't fit to live," he says. "You may be 38 years old, as I happen to be," King says. "And one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls upon you to stand for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause, and you refuse to do it because you are afraid." He goes on, "You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. Now, you're afraid that you will lose your job, or you are afraid that you will be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you are afraid that somebody will stab you or shoot you. So you refuse to take a stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90, King says in his sermon. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of spirit at 38. You died when you refused to stand up for right. You died when you refused to stand up for truth. You died when you refused to stand up for justice. Wow, that's unequivocal. So living in that question, that tension of that question, I guess I call us into the tension because it is something, if we live into this question, can we do this better and become more unequivocal, and less living in equivocation? How to live a life without equivocation. Now that is a noble cause. What does my faith in Jesus Christ call me to? How far am I willing to go for the love of God and my neighbor? Unequivocally. A quote making the rounds on social media comes from Victor Hugo, but it was attributed. The question is, you have enemies? Why, it's the story of every person who has done a great deed or created a new idea without equivocation. In essence, it has also been stated, you have enemies? Good. Then it indicates that you have stood up for something once in your life. Talk about living a life unequivocally, without equivocation. So choose this day and live in this tension and ask yourself, what are you willing to die for? What are you willing to live in such a way that you are uncomfortable because you know that you're standing up for something that's right, but you will get attacked for it. So take the time to explore what your yes is and how to live so radically in that yes, in that amen, that you will not allow yourself equivocation. That's my exploration and prayer. I hope it is yours. Till we meet again, God bless.